Hello, I'm Tim Smith of the Adams County Historical Society, and welcome to another Monuments Monday. And again, we're going to cover some of the questions that were asked of us about monuments, markers, and tablets around the battlefield. Eric Cole asks us, when did the 107th New York Monument on Culp's Hill get placed? Local Elmira boys. On the page when he put this question up, Michael Reinhardt actually answered him on our Facebook feed. It was dedicated on September 17th, 1888. The monument, of course, is near Spangler Spring, and I should mention that there's also a Chemung County company in the 86th New York. You know, when people come to Gettysburg, we always ask them where they're from. And I strive very hard to show them something from their county or from their town. For instance, yesterday, we had a group of senior citizens visit the museum from Lebanon County, Pennsylvania. And as luck would have it, they were from near Annville. And as you remember, a few weeks ago, the murder of State Patrolman Francis Harley was actually a resident of Annville in Lebanon County. So, you know, especially with school groups, we try to get them out at the monument that represents the place where they're from, and we talk about people that maybe lived around them or are buried in cemeteries near them. And so I enjoy it when somebody asks a question about a group of people from a specific place. So Lori La Violette asks, what if any monuments no longer exist on the battlefield that used to be there at some point? If any were removed, what was the reason and where did they go? The answer is yes, but it may be not the kind of yes, monuments are no longer there, that you're thinking. At Gettysburg, we don't really have a good example of a monument that was taken down because people objected to it. But there are lots of monuments that used to exist on the battlefield that no longer exist. And you know, this is another thing I thought that would be really interesting to do a whole video on. At one point, there were wooden signs all around the town and all around the battlefield. And there were things that were blazed into trees. John Batchelder, the early government historian, had driven stakes into the ground, numbered stakes, when he had reunions with veterans and when groups of veterans came out. My stakes that marked the spot where so-and-so was killed, or the spot where different units were involved in different actions on the field. And we do have a partial list from John Batchelder of the numbered stakes and what the numbered stakes represent. But the stakes no longer exist, and you know, we argue about where each of these specific sites might have been. I'll try to throw here in the photograph where one of these stakes is actually leaning against a rock in front of the General Warren boulder on Little Round Top, to give you an idea what we're talking about. Also, there were painted inscriptions on rocks. And of course, Colonel John Wheeler fell here is one that comes to mind as a rock that was painted, and it was intended as a memorial to honor him, and the paint faded away and it was never replaced, and today you can find the rock, but you know, it's no longer there. There were metal signs on the battlefield that were tablets to Massachusetts regiments all over the field. There was a pole with a sign on it indicating where the Massachusetts units had fought. And in some cases on the battlefield today, the poles are still sticking up out of the ground, but the bronze plaques are no longer there. There are markers that were moved, and so areas were renovated, and the markers or flank markers got moved and were never put back. For instance, we'll talk about the right flank of an Ohio artillery unit. The right flank marker, the 20th Maine, or the left flank marker of the 20th Maine, was missing for many years. A car hit a plaque on Hancock Avenue to the 107th Pennsylvania Monument, and that was gone for a very long time. A car hit the 74th Pennsylvania Monument, and they took that monument away and fixed it and brought it back. Lightning struck the 9th New York Cavalry Memorial, and it was taken away. And then, like, the statues on the Pennsylvania Monument were taken away for a few years, refurbished and put back. And the North Carolina Monument was taken away for a while and brought back. The Lincoln statue in the square was taken away, and it was refurbished and brought back. So, I mean, you have that scenario also. So there's good examples of that, where monuments are just, they eroded away, they're no longer there, or they were taken away for some reason. Top fan Ron Moore asks, "Hey Tim, where exactly is the headquarters marker for General Ewell on Hanover Street?" So this would be the John Lutz house. So this marker was placed about 1918, 1919. I looked in the newspaper to see if I could find a mention of Ewell's headquarters marker being placed at that site, and I was unable to. There are 14 upright cannon barrels around the Gettysburg battlefield. The Confederate headquarters markers were placed in 1918, 1919. The Union markers were placed in April 1920. And I did find an article about the Union headquarters markers being placed around the field. But we're not sure under whose research these markers were placed around the field. I remember years ago having a conversation about this topic with historian Kathy George at the National Park Service. And I think, there's some question about it. I've done a lot of reading about Richard Ewell, know a lot about his whereabouts at the battle, and there is no reason to believe that Ewell's headquarters were ever located at the John Lutz house. Just a little bit about John Lutz. I've written a little bit about him. He's an immigrant from Germany. Let's see. In the 1860 census, John is living there. He's with his wife, Anne. In 1863, he was 62 years old, so he's born about 1801. And in 1859, there's an advertisement in the newspaper for John Lutz's brickyard. And he ran a brickyard through the time of the Civil War. And there's a nice 1862 advertisement for it in the paper. And he describes it as being on the west bank of Rock Creek. The tract consists of 7 acres, more or less, excellent land, including a very large and productive garden. The improvements are a 1.5-story double brick house with 2 cellars, And then it goes on to mention there is on the premises an extensive brickyard having any quantity of prime clay and being well located for such a business. So Yule's headquarters marker is in front of the site of the John Lutz Brickyard. We do have several accounts where they talk about General Yule having his headquarters at different locations, and none of them discuss having the headquarters here. One thing that I find a little puzzling about the headquarters monuments, there were originally 5 national military parks in the country. And each of them had like a board of commissioners. And instead of like getting together and establishing rules for all the national military parks, each one has its own separate set of rules, which confuses me. At Gettysburg, upright cannon barrels marked the location of the general's headquarters. And in Antietam, upside-down cannon barrels marked the site where a general was killed. At Chickamauga, a stack of cannonballs marks where a general was killed. And at Shiloh, a stack of cannonballs is the general's headquarters. You figure it out. Well, thanks again for watching our video. And if you like the content that we put up on a weekly basis on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe.